Lovely to see so many people here. Thank you all for coming. I want to introduce Andrew. Andrew comes from an educational background. He's director of Skyreach Consulting, which is an educational technology company, which was based here, but actually consults throughout sub-Saharan Africa, the developing world. So he travels a lot. He's a drone pilot, and he is a member of BOTSOC and is a volunteer on our behalf. Those of you who were here in 2023, September, the Heritage Day weekend, will remember the storm. Don't think we'll forget that. But there may be others who were not here. And that was quite a dramatic event, and reshaped our landscape completely. And it's not something you say, well, we need to go back to where we were, because this happens all the time. So the landscape was modified, and all we can do is to have an opportunity to monitor how the changes have affected it and what comes up in terms of the regrowth and redevelopment. So Andrew offered to do this drone survey on our behalf, which was fabulous because it's an opportunity to start from scratch. I think we started in January after the storm, and he's been doing these surveys at regular intervals every 6 months. So we have monitored the development of the slips over time. Now, we may not be able to modify the environment, but people need to get out into nature. They need to be in the environment, and that's what is so lovely about Fernkloof. So I have to say, the Bergstap group, because I know, Tony, you one of those, that wonderful group who volunteered to re-establish the paths, because the reserve was closed after that storm. We couldn't get in to walk, we couldn't get into the gardens, we couldn't do anything. And they offered to re-establish the hiking paths. And they did a fantastic job across some of those slips that were where the path was completely washed away. So there's real sort of engineering that had to happen to create bridges across those paths to re-establish the hiking paths. And they did it in an amazingly quick time. And that initiative has continued. So we've got Quinton Salvi, who joined that group to do the elephant path, and then the zigzag, the Fernkloof zigzag, and he's just about finished the Fernkloof zigzag, which is fabulous, because those are two really important hiking trails in Fernkloof. And the Bergstappers are continuing to modify, change, maintain the paths as they exist. But it's not an end of story. This is an ongoing thing. So we need to actually maintain the funding for this, because although these are volunteers who are doing this, it requires material and it requires a certain amount of labor. So there is a cost to this, and we've been very fortunate that the Hermanus community has been extremely generous in sponsoring this project, and we hope that they will continue to do that. It's certainly a way in which Botanical Society can make a contribution to Fernkloof, and I think it's important, because otherwise this opportunity is not going to be available to people. So I think at this point, I'm going to hand over to Andrew to show us some wonderful photography, because I've seen some of it, of the slips after they've happened, and how things have developed over time. That was so it's 24, it's 12, it's a year, it's a full year, more than a year. more than a year. So
All right, so welcome everyone, and thank you very much for coming. I expected to talk to about 8 people, so I feel a little bit daunted. I had to take a bit of Dutch courage. Yes, so my name is Andrew Moore. Where I fit in was, I'll just get this going again because you can. I'm part of a little informal hiking group of which Belinda Deverish is part of. And so I'd been showing off the drone and taking little video clips. And she said, hey, we've had a big issue in the... We've had a big issue in the nature reserve with the Heritage Day floodings and all the torrential rains. What we would love is if you could just come and document it, take some videos and some photos. And I thought, hey, hang on, can't we do a little bit more than that? So the thinking was we should actually do a survey. So I'm going to show you in a minute how the drone would do the survey. So yes, it can take beautiful pictures. And here's some of the images that the drone has taken. But it can also be used for work. It's not just for pretty pictures only. You can actually make it do some heavy lifting. So I will take you through how the drone actually collects the data, how it builds 3D models, how you can get very accurate measurements. Oh, all right. I'll come stand here. Okay. I don't. You don't? All right, I'll talk to you guys at the back. All right. So the drone can do many things. Just keep reminding me to put... The drone can do many things. So the idea then was to actually do what we call an orthomosaic survey, where we get the various photographs and we overlap them so that it can take measurements from the ground surface. I'll show you photos to make it easier to understand in a minute, but it triangulates. It can actually build a 3D model from what the information that it gets back. And from there, you can therefore take very accurate measurements. I'll also show how naive I was when we've designed the survey. Certain things, nature doesn't respond the way I expected, and we had some interesting results. So I will show you some examples of how it is being rehabilitated. I'm also at the end going to ask a number of questions. I'm hoping to draw from you on your expertise in terms of, is there more data out there which you guys are holding, which we can then incorporate into the design of the survey? Especially as this is the Botanical Society and plants aren't really my thing. So I'm hoping you guys can come in and share your expertise. All right, so who am I? Who's this guy? He can't speak loud enough. All right, so I am Andrew Moore. I've been living here for 2.5 years. I'm ex-Joburg, don't hold it against me. All right. I am an education technology consultant. So my bread and butter is getting learning online. So remember COVID-19 and all the problems with the schools. The teachers weren't ready for doing remote teaching. How do we use technology to help students who have to learn remotely? That's my stuff. I do that. I work with ministries of education. I work with universities and around the world, but specifically developing world. So I work in places throughout Africa, parts of Asia, Caribbean, India, etc. So that's really my bread and butter. And so it hasn't really got much to do with drones, right? However, it is a hobby. It's something I enjoy doing. I am a South African Civil Aviation Authority certified drone pilot. So I did the license, all right? And I am also a volunteer for the Botanical Society, so it was all done through love. Okay, there's no cash. In fact, that was nice, that glass of wine. All right, so it brings us to the pivotal moment. If you look at Google Earth, for example, it all looks lovely and pristine still. If you go into Google Earth and look at Fernkloof Nature Reserve, it looks beautiful, green, all right. But on the 24th and 25th of September, we had the Heritage Day floods. All hell broke loose. I'm going to ask Mary-Ann to tell her what her experience was on that particular night.
It happened to be the time when we're having our celebration of Fynbos, which is the major fundraising event for us. So we had the hall all beautifully arranged. The braai was ready. All sorts of things were ready. And it poured and poured and poured. And it just, eventually, of course, we had to give up. But Jack Bold, who was in the nursery at the time, said that night he heard the mountain coming down. He heard the rocks coming down. And I happened to live in Fernkloof village, and that was transformed into a river. The road became a river. And I was just very lucky. The houses on both sides of me were completely flooded. Completely. The one lot of people had only moved in 3 days before. So that was brand new house. My house, I had one room that was flooded. The rest, I don't know why, I was somehow spared. But it was a dramatic event, and it was never the same afterwards.
All right, so when we woke up in the morning, we had this situation. Within the Fernkloof Nature Reserve, there was approximately, I'm struggling to get actual figures for the nature reserve, but Hermanus had 102, and I'm going to show you some other statistics which show how serious it was. There are reports that it was much higher than that. But when we woke up in the morning, there were 36 landslides within the nature reserve. 21 of them are in Fisherman's Kloof, so that's this valley up here. We had 8 in Fernkloof, so this is Fisherman's Kloof here, and then comes round. Here's where this is Fernkloof up here, and this is Lemonkup is down here. And then there were 6 in here, and there was 1 in Waterkloof, a big one, but just 1. All right, so 36 of these landslides had taken place. Why? Why that night? What was so special about that night? So we're still looking for the data, but it looks like it was a perfect storm. If you have a look at the rainfall, you can see here this red one here. Oh, I've got a stick. Botanical Society. It chose it specially. All right. If you have a look here at this line here, this shows you the amount of accumulative rainfall. You can see at that point it had got to, I'll show you the figures in a minute, it's 22 hours, and then it fell away. If you actually look at the per hour, you can see it was coming in phases, but there was an enormous spike then, and there's another spike on the 25th early in the morning, and you can see like this pyramid of rain. Okay. So what was happening to the soil? So if you look at these other lines, the 1 0 to 7, so it's this blue, this purpley blue one. This is showing you how much moisture was in the soil. And you can see it spiked there. So that is from the surface to 7 centimeters into the soil. And if you look at the next one, which is this greeny one, it is 7 to 28. You see it follows close behind. But then perhaps the most significant one is this orange one, which is up to 1 meter. You see it's more or less protected, and then suddenly it starts to rise as well, which means the soil was having to hold that much amount of water at that particular time. So there's the key moment where the perfect storm happened. So this is called open met data. You can just go online and ask for a specific place, and you can turn on the various filters. It's openly licensed. You can just download it and use it. I do think I used Hermanus. I don't think I got actually Fernkloof, but these are the figures for very close by. So those are the actual figures. But I think you've got the idea. Obviously, that amount of water in the system was to result in these 36 landslides. I am no geologist, but I've been looking around and talking to some geologists, and I've got a couple of reasons why. I'll come up with them in a moment. So what did we actually do? So this is my guy. He's just an off-the-shelf drone. He's nothing special. He is a DJI, if you want to know, and he's called an Air 3. The sad thing is many of these mapping survey tools don't support him. I call them drones are hymns because they're disruptive and ugly and noisy, and so therefore they have to be hymns, not hers. Right? I called him a hymn, and so therefore I had to do it by hand. I couldn't actually just put it into an automative grid where it would just fly up and down and actually measure. I had to go forward, take a picture. Go forward, take a picture. I had to do each one by hand, which is not ideal. Oh, loud. Okay. I'm slacking. All right, so the process is what I was doing was I was making sure that all the photographs overlapped. They must overlap both forwards and sideways. All right. So the idea then is when the survey machine, which actually does all the mathematics, takes all the measurements that the drone has connected, triangulates them, and as you moved forward, it can actually work out the profile of the ground. How far below were you? And therefore, it begins, and if you look, these are my ones. You can see slight overlaps. Okay, and then as it moves along, it can actually then work out how high is that point above the ground. And then it can build, instead of just a photograph, it builds a 3D model. So here's the mechanics, all right? As it flies along, it takes a picture. It now knows that point and has this point, and that point, it moves on to this one, but now it can actually re-look at that point and get multiple data points as to each of the spots. And therefore, it's not really a 2D photo, it becomes a 3D photo. It actually has the data in order to turn it into terrain rather than just a flat picture. So when you actually put it together, then it actually builds a model. I can't turn this one because it's just a slide, but on my computer, I can move it so that I can look this side, look that side. When we actually start measuring them, when we use the measuring tools now, it's accurate. It is accurate for altitude. It's accurate for the terrain. It is much more accurate than trying to measure on a 2D photograph. So that's how it does its job. I'll try and demonstrate it with this. So on my computer now, I can actually come in. This is the big scar in the Lemonkup Valley. You can see the amount of data it's collected. It's really detailed. And now I'm tilting it. It's not great, but you're beginning to get the idea. You can now see the profile of the mountain. Here's Lemonkup in the way, etc. So it's built a 3D model which we can measure. I have all of these models, and I've been doing it now for a while. So I've got January 25, I've got July 24, and I've got January 24. And now I can actually lay them on top of each other. So never mind measuring, you can actually just do a comparison by just laying the one on top of the other. This is called Google Earth. You might have been able to, some of you played with Google Earth online. This one's called Google Earth Pro. It's still free though, but it allows you to have the ability to lay these maps on top of each other. So you actually sit on top of their map, and then you drop yours on top. So theirs is the base level, Google's is the base level, And then, yeah, you can then overlap your surveys so you can see how they might look different over time. The amount of data is amazing. It's really, really, you can get down to the little rock sizes, the little pebbles. You can get that much data. This is the path running through the big, I call him Big Scar, all right? And you can see there's actually paths cross at 3 points on that one. We've been doing it, we did in January 24, or it's the drone and I. It doesn't take much manpower. It just man and his drone. Sounds terrible. January 2024, July 2024, January 2025, and yeah, we've got another one coming up. I'm very excited about the next one. Yeah, I'll tell you why in a minute. But we're trying to do it every 6 months. So just as a word of warning, if you have drones, you can't just go into nature reserves and fly drones. It's one of the laws is you may not fly drones in nature reserves, you may not fly them in national parks, etc. But the Botanical Society and the municipality have agreed and given permission to do this. When I fly, I have to have my little yellow clapboard. It says, caution, drone operations in progress. Sounds good. I wear my orange bib so that I stand out like a beacon in the thing. So yes, you have to get permission. The laws about flying drones are extremely restrictive. The Civil Aviation Authority is very concerned that you're going to fly one into an aeroplane. Fair enough. However, in Hermanus, we're in quite an interesting place. The nearest, the closest air zone is 4 kilometers above us. So when you see these aeroplanes flying along the coastline, they've had to put in a special flight plan in order to be able to fly up and down the coast. And then my drone will actually also monitor, is there any flight activity in the area? So everyone's very worried about interacting with it. So it is a situation where you have to have permission. And luckily for me, in fact, it's a great boon. I've been able to fly in the nature reserve, but even I need to warn people. So I normally say, I'm going to be doing surveying on a Sunday at 9 o'clock, warn the rangers and everyone else. So then it's all done above board. So keep that in mind. It's not just buy one off the shelf and go for it. So we've been collecting for all 36, but there are 6 or 7 which are really interesting because they are different. Anything specific about what we found? Me and the drone. Is it a textbook case of a landslide? And initially it does look like it is. This is a geology sketch. You can see that there are these, the top of these are sandstone. These blue ones are the sandstone tops. So many of the peaks have a sandstone top, and they're sitting on some type of shale or broken down granite, this SG here. And then on this side where asphalt is, etc., it's more of a peat, organic peat type of soil. However, only one of the landslides is in here. Nearly all of them are in the sandstone, which is not quite strange because normally that's the resistant, that's why it's on the top. It is resistant to wear. All right.
I'm talking for my husband.
No, good. So normally the sandstone is considered the more resistant to wear, and therefore that's why it's at the top. It's taking a while for it to erode. However, most of the heads that I mentioned tend to be in the sandstone. So on the one hand, we say here it's usually strong, it's and has good bearing capacity, but can be variable depending on the weathering. And there are certain instances when the sandstone is ready to go. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Whereas I said there's very little activity here. Any activity in these bands is normally from the rocks coming from above, smashing their way through and incising them gullies and crevices. And as I say, there's just one in there. So it looks like, this is from a textbook, and these look very similar to what we have experienced in the nature reserve. So what happens then is there's some type of basin where there is decomposing sandstone or granite, and it turns into like a clay. I'm a layman, I'm not a geologist, so in my mind I think of a slurry. If you think of builder's slurry, where there's so much liquid, so much moisture in the soil that it begins to become very heavy and it can't bear its own weight. But it's not like it's not like a whole terrace, it is just these little areas where there's been decomposition taking place. So you get these little basins as such. That particular night, with that much water in the system, it looks like those pockets could no longer hold their own weight, and then they let go. All right, so, and that does seem to fit textbook analysis of these landslides. As they come down, obviously this is incised by all the rocks, the soil coming down, and it cuts deeper and deeper, and then some type of resolution at the bottom. For Fernkloof, mostly went into the little rivers and then carried on down inside the rivers. However, I am not a geologist, and some of our geologist friends are talking. Dylan Blake has got some ideas. He believes that it could also be, it's not been tested, he says it could also be something to do with the aquifers in the area, how much water they were holding and when they had released and when they had filled up again. So that is something that the geologists are having a think about, but it might not just be as simple, straight textbook as I described. Okay, so it could be a little bit more complicated than that. The jury is still out as to ours. It's happened over and over and over again. What might be of interest is that we've never had quite on that, well, there's no record of it on that scale before, all right? But there's very definitely evidence of these landslides throughout the past. I was sitting in the golf course cafeteria, having a burger, and then I'm looking at the pictures, all the old history of the golf club. I go, oh, Sherbet, look at that. There's one there. Okay. It says on the little thing is around about 1950s. Even if it's 1960s, that's quite interesting that there was that one above that particular hole. So I thought, well, I wonder if it's still there. So I went to look for it. I found it. And I got the drone to scan it again. Maybe this will get, here we go. I got to scan it again. So we can see in 2025, actually it was last year, 2024, how had it rehabilitated? So this is Bosco Church. You know Bosco Church? Here's the elbow into Hermanus Heights, is it? Yeah. So it's directly above the, oh, where's my botanical stick? You can see that it's still, you can still see all the rubble and the rubbish that came down there. It's grown over, etc. But there's the head, still exposed. How many years? 60 years later? This is what the head looks like now. Okay, so it's in no rush to, to rehabilitate itself. Then I mentioned Google Earth. I thought, well, Google Earth shows you historical epochs. Let's go and have a look. So it doesn't go that far back, but in 2006, this is the Lemoncorp Valley. There were two very definite scars. And I could see those scars right up until the most recent Google Earth image. So it's been there at least, well, it's almost 2026. It's been there at least 20 years. Okay, so if we look at this one, this was 2016. There's that one. And we can see there was another one. So we're going on about the big scar, but actually there's evidence that it had already started to go much, much earlier in 2016. So yes, is it a precedent? The scale maybe, but not the landslides. The landslides have been happening throughout history. Right, so how quickly is it rehabilitating? Are they rehabilitating? So when I had my little stand here during the Fynbos celebration, I had these two charts up, and I was comparing the first 9 months, because I started in January, and I was saying there's been very little rehabilitation, almost nothing. In fact, when you looked at them, the two surveys, it was very disappointing. There was nothing to go eureka about. It was pretty much a carbon copy of how it had been 6 months previous. So it looked like it was going to be a very long journey in order to get it to be rehabilitated. However, as soon as the spring came, because the 6 months were during winter, as soon as the spring came, it began to green, and not the way I was expecting. All right, so what was happening, instead of them slowly shrinking, was that they start to green. So where the topsoil is still in place, then the seeds and the existing plants begin to push through. It takes them a while to get through. And then what we're finding is that the heads stay more or less barren. So here's a close-up. Here's one of the heads. If we look at the head carefully, you can see there's the topsoil. And then here's the exposed sandstone or decomposing granite, etc. So that hardly changes. This is a close-up. This is now almost 2 years later. Nothing. It's hardly any vegetation has taken place in there. So the heads seem to be resistant to rehabilitation, whereas the tails respond relatively quickly. Obviously, the topsoil being still in place. Here's one of the tails, and you can see it's getting quite dense now. This was taken about two months ago. You can see now it's coming through quite nicely. That will slowly begin to disappear. Here's another one. This one's a much smaller one. It didn't have far to go. This is the base of Fisherman's Kloof. And then here's the head. And then here's the tail. And you see that it's coming through nice. I naively believed they would get narrower. I don't know why I thought that. Now it seems obvious. But at the time, I thought I'd measure. So I measured them all for the first survey. And then I started measuring them for the second. It's exactly the same. But because of what was happening, when they weren't narrowing, they were coming from underneath. Okay.
Sorry, what's an interesting question is the rehabilitation in the tail. Does that constitute the same sort of species that was there?
Right, I've got to pose that very question to the botanical members in a moment. Okay, good one. Right, this is the one directly above us. We're sitting in here. You can see this is a big long one, but the head was quite small, but it had this enormous long tail. And if we look at the detail in that one, you can see it's also beginning to green quite nicely. This is my favorite one. I call him Shooting Star. He's very close to the convergence when you go up towards the waterfall. So you can actually walk along here. Here's the boardwalks. You can actually walk along here and see very clearly all the different plant species that are both above and below the path. Obviously there's nothing. That one is there's no growth. Rehabilitation, yes and no. All right, so where the heads are, we are finding that the sandstone is exposed. For some reason, the plants aren't quick to recolonize those particular areas. If we look at the historical data, it suggests we're talking decades. When I mentioned this to geologists, they laughed at me and said, "What did you expect? This is geology. It takes millennium for things to happen." I said, "Oh, I wanted it by Wednesday." So No, they said you were in for a long wait, potentially decades before it begins to cover over properly. Where the topsoil is in place, then yeah, it's coming through quite nice. All right, which brings us to James's question. What about the plants? So I've been taking photos and I'm very happy to share them, but basically I'm not in a position to actually comment on what type of plants. However, when I was chatting to one of the ladies who looks after the visitor center fynbos display, she was mentioned that she'd noticed that some of the species which she normally used to have to go high to collect are actually now a lot low. She was saying that some of the species that she had to go high to collect, now she's beginning to find some of them at much lower levels. So it looks like they have came down with the slide and are now trying to reestablish themselves at that lower level. We need proper data. As I say, I've only got anecdotal stories, but that would be very interesting. If we can tie it together with the whole story of the landslides, how they happened, and some of the benefits or not. Okay. So yes, so it's my challenge now to you guys, the members of the Botanical Society, to kind of start looking, what are the plants that are first to colonize, and then maybe some of the others come much later. That would be an interesting study as well. So what order? Are there changes like these ladies suggest in the distribution? Yeah, I think that's something we can add to our survey. And that's all I've got for you. All right. Just a word that all the information we've collected for the Botanical Society and the municipality, it's all openly licensed. So if other people would like to use it for data, for their own research, etc., it is, yeah, I'm quite happy to share it. It's got an open license. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, after having walked some of those paths shortly afterwards, and then also maybe 6 or 8 months afterwards, very much as Andrew describes, there's a profile at the top where you can see it's just the topsoil that's come out and the weathered rock below. And obviously that was more water saturated, and that slipped away in almost a scoop-like fashion. And most of that material slid over all the fynbos below. In fact, you could see it really shortly afterwards that it wasn't actually eroding that away, it was sliding over it. Obviously it took some clouds out. In those larger channels like your big scar, they were at the head of an existing drainage, and they really scarred deeply. But the sides of them, they would have washed out, and they've only just taken off, slid over the topsoil. And quite often in those sort of channels, they build a levee on the side. So some of the heavier, bigger rock get pushed to the side, and they're too heavy, they can't go further, and they form a barrier down each side, and that's quite common. So that I can come and show you some of the stuff I've got.
Any other questions, queries, comments?
Just go to America and to the Rocky Mountains and have a look.
Similar.
Nothing grows there.
Yeah.
Because every year it snows and you've got all this weight of snow in that, and the shale just comes down. And it's changing all the time. All the time.
Andrew, one thing that I noticed, there weren't huge piles of debris at the bottom of most of those landslides, which is what I would have expected to see. Is that because it's mostly soil that's washed down and then it's just washed away in the rivers?
So it's all according to which slides. If you look at the Lemunkup ones, there's enormous boulders which have come down and now are resting. If you go from the visitor center and you start almost immediately, the first 50 meters, that's one of the deepest ones there. You can see all the boulders. But where the soil's gone is a good question, because there's either exposed incised channels, which are not rehabilitating, with boulders everywhere, but there's not a lot of soil. So where did that go? So it could have come down the river. Yeah.
I'm no expert, in this, but my gut feel is that you've lost everything on the head and the soil has gone into the tail, but that now changes the total environment for possibly new species, different species that were there. That's just my gut feel. You know.
And I want to know, so when you plan that grid to fly over, can you program that the drone does it by itself?
So the question is, how do you do the survey? For most drones, you actually program a grid. So it goes backwards and forwards, and then it does the photographs at exactly the right overlap. As I said, my guy doesn't talk to their programs, so I had to do it by hand. But yeah, normally it is
So you
automated.
had to fly it by hand.
I had to fly it by hand. Yeah. Yes.
Andrew, just to add a comment as well, I'm also a geologist. It would be quite useful for you to go and look at the slips in Harold Porter Gardens and how they formed. And probably the densest concentration of the slips is actually Babylon Storing and the Himalanada Valley. And there's a very strong correlation there between the invasives, and the botanists, I think, will know here that those invasives and the gum and the resin actually kills the natural plants around the base. And that also, seems to be one of the drivers. So in that tremendous, rainstorms, those areas were already damaged and loosened, so they were more prone to being undermined. And obviously all of this goes back to the angle of repose. So a lot of these slopes, there's a beautiful one around the corner here, is the rock and the soil there is beyond the stability zone. So if you wet it and liquefy it, it's obviously going to fall.
Not quite relevant to the situation here. I was years ago involved in the Magaliesberg rehabilitating slope on the southern side of the mountain, where people way back used to drag down logs from harvesting trees on the slope and just left it. And so this became hardened, almost like rock, but it was just clay. But nothing could grow there for like generations. And I was involved in playing with rehabilitation. Marianne used to visit me there because we climbed the mountain in that area. And the first thing the people said to me, put rows of stones across this so it will gather sand, and then roots can take, and then something will happen. Did that, went very slow. Then they said, okay, add dry branches from the dead trees in the area, put that on top. Also helped a bit. But then I kept some cattle, and I had a kraal with loads of cattle manure. And when that got old, little old tractor up the hill and carried bags and put it where the rocks were, and then suddenly you had green belts, and you could actually rehabilitate mechanically some parts of what I would say the parts that we rehabilitated there look very much like the heads, but of course here they would be rock and very steep, so it might be very hard and very far to do anything. But it's technically possible in certain situations to get something back.
So when I had the stand in the Fynbos celebration, someone came to me and said, so what is the Botanical Society doing about it? So they were wanting a more proactive replanting of things. So I said, one, I know that, they're reliant on donations. I hope you donated for your wine. And volunteers. So I think it's more a natural process that they're going for. Let's see how we go. Oh, not so sure about that. So yes, there are different ways to tackle the issue. We go for the natural, and it has happened before. let's see how it goes. Geology in motion. Yes.
Well, I just want to add to the whole landslide story. I don't want to alarm anybody, but if you live in Betty's Bay, you must be aware of the large rocks that lie around. There, I believe, is evidence of the largest landslide in this area, which comes right through the middle of Betty's Bay, and it's the most beautiful debris flow lobe. And all those big boulders were just sort of thrown out from that hole. That'll be a wonderful one to photograph, to get a really interesting idea of the shape of a massive landslide.
All right. Any other comments?
Just a question. Are there not rainfall records where you can relate that golfing picture to when that happened? And if it rains again like that, can you not send out a warning that we've reached the perfect storm and move out of Betty's Bay urgently?
Yes.
And I think this has been just a unique opportunity, actually, to engage with the landscape and what happens over time. So this has been wonderful, Andrew, that you've managed to capture it. And I hope it will continue, that we'll continue. And then I think we need the botanists to get in there and look more closely at what is actually coming up and do some kind of survey there. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Thanks for you. Thank you so much.